protecting commercial rights in sport. So without any further ado, I'll ask Jacques to address us, and then again followed by a bit of a panel discussion. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invite to address the conference. In preparing to address the conference, I thought, what contribution can I make? And I've been working in the sporting industry for longer than 2 decades, so surely it's got to come from an industry perspective. And I've been blessed to work at the national level and for a very long time also on provincial or affiliate level. And I thought I'll keep it very practical, that we look at the industry's challenges. We also look at ways that we can try and protect our sponsors or our own commercial rights and speak through that. That is, of course, just after that, I thought I'll start with a definition, which also in itself doesn't make sense. But intellectual property rights and commercial rights refer to the legal mechanisms and entitlements that allow sports organizations, athletes, and other stakeholders to protect and exploit their assets. Commercial rights refer to the ability to generate revenue from various assets within sport. I have done a lot of research on rugby. I wanted to bring cricket in as well, but Cricket South Africa has actually found a foolproof way not to get ambushed, and that's you just don't have sponsors. So I then had to go to the Springboks because they have, and they've had a lot of challenges as well. And I actually contacted the agency and talked through that. We're very blessed at Titans that we got 62 partners or sponsors. That's quite a lot, and a lot of them are within the same industry. And we've been blessed to retain about 98% of them. So we literally, you have sponsors from valleys to free haircuts and everything in between as well. And I do think that we try and manage it really, really well. Engaging with sponsors, I think people underestimate it. We have a monthly meeting of 15 minutes with all our sponsors online. We actually tell them what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. It's been a really good exercise. And it's only 15 minutes. So the moment they realize it's only 15 minutes, they join. I go through a 15-slide presentation. And just engaging, because the moment your sponsors, from our perspective, feels unhappy or they feel that their rights is not protected, then you're in trouble, because they actually hold you liable for it. That's one thing you've got to understand. If a sponsor feels that you're not protecting their commercial rights that they bought, you're in trouble. And 62 is difficult to handle. We've got a lot of people in the financial services. We've just signed quite a sexy sponsorship in AFPOP. It's a big industry. It's a big industry, and they got a constant flow of customers. So, but again, we've also got Momentum. We've got ABSA. We've got Access Bank. They're not so concerned about AFPOP. We even have the AFPOP end. If you understand cricket, all the death bowling will be from that end. So yeah, they're actually wonderful, wonderful people. The CEO told me that the informal slogan is, "We let last oaks to let you down." So let me just continue on a bit more of a serious note. Then I looked at it, and you'll see that sponsorship contracts, the sponsorship and endorsements agreements are in 2 blocks. The one refers to, if you like, the federation that's got sponsorship contracts in place, broadcasting contracts. Just an interesting note, when I was at Cricket South Africa acting again, we had previously sold our broadcasting rights to Sky, and then of course the whole gambling industry came in, and we then thought it's a good idea. Luckily not me, I just arrived to try and sort out all the issues, but we then sold the feed also to a betting company, because they just needed to go to their platform. So that was a nice little exercise for us, just in broadcasting rights, intellectual properties, of course, that makes sense, trademarks, copyrights, image rights, and then sponsorship, endorsements, merchandising, and licensing. And there's also financial regulations, and some of them are very restrictive of nature. I'll go through that as well. Gambling has become very big for us. After all those years of alleged match fixing, we thought it's a great idea to now take hands with the gambling and the betting companies. But again, a bit like beer, while the public consume your product, they're also sponsoring it, so it gets their brands out. So it has become a big role player. And then taxation and revenue sharing, dispute resolutions, and arbitration. If there is any form of ambush marketing, let me tell you now, it's a very emotional thing. And the problem with it, it's like when people run over the pitch or over the rugby field and everybody cheers them. And you think like, we just want to lock these people up, which we do. But the public themselves really enjoy it. I was at the Springbok match at Nelspruit. Yes, everybody ran. I think it's only the Comrades, it's a bigger running event than the Springbok Test in Nelspruit, because everybody just ran. But the public themselves look at it and go like, oh, this is funny. There was a few big tackles in there. The same with ambush marketing. The moment they roll out, and we're going to look at a few examples, the moment it's funny, and the moment it's really the public enjoy it, then it's not seen as something bad, or you're actually stealing. So you need to educate the public as well on it, but I'll get through it. The cricket landscape has changed dramatically. India, and I'm going to give you some numbers. So if India plays a T20 match in South Africa, you only get your broadcasting rights with incoming tours, so home matches. If they play one T20, it's worth $8 million. That's one T20. It's actually amazing. It's jumped quite a lot. The last time I negotiated was on 5. It's gone up now as well. And remember, that's their stock. They still got to monetize it. So people don't realize the amount of money that is spent in it. If you ever want to understand how to bully world cricket, if they now cut a T20, you lose $8 million. If they cut 2, you lose $16 million. And they've done it in the past. We lost, I think, over 300 million just because they were angry with us. Somehow now we're very friendly and close to them. I think we've also worked out the financial model. And then there's T20 leagues all over the world. That has happened. I'll show you a player just a bit later. Then how does sport make their money? It changes, I guess, from code to code, but definitely in cricket, broadcasting rights and related to the Indian market is the big one. That's where you get the most of your money. Sponsorship and advertising has not been doing well at federation level for Cricket South Africa. They've lost significant advertising, sponsorship goes down, merchandising, ticket sales and hospitality, and then also franchising agreement. I just want to give you an idea of how busy the cricket space has become. So this play is actually the season started. So it's actually 3 seasons with the Titans in all formats. Played 2 IPL, 1 CPL, SA20, 2 tournaments. He's going to play the 3rd one now. Played in the Major League, 2 tournaments, 1 T10 tournament, and then he played for South Africa against the Aussies. So I'm not going to let you guess. I'm just going to show you. This Dewald Brevis is 21 years old. This is the amount of cricket this youngster has played, and he's 21 now. He's also earned a bit of money, which is a bit more than the pocket money he used to receive 3 years ago. But it's become sport in itself is very congested as it is. Go into a stadium and look at all the brands. It's congested as it is. Now, what happened in cricket, I think cricket is being deregulated. I think the ICC is only an events company now. It's been deregulated, and it's now owned by people that's got a lot of money. So I guess in the past, you would buy a yacht or a wine farm. Now, there's other options. You can buy a cricket team. That also speaks to your ego, and the whole world has changed around that. I just want to go through cricket sponsorships, and it's funny what we attract over the years. So some of us will remember the Benson Hedges series. It was actually a World Cup. It's actually, if you sit now and you think about it, that was a big thing, Benson and Hedges. So, and Castle has been around for a very, very long time. And then we have some strange but wonderful fits. So KFC mini cricket for a healthy living. Just think a little bit about that. I could never make that fit. KFC for a healthy living. And then, of course, welcome to Incredible. SA20 has been absolutely amazing. Huge success. It impacts on us as well, because you've got to understand now that we'll have a clean stadium. I did a bit of research, and I even wrote a dissertation on the effect of clean stadiums. It's funny what the research showed. So this person comes into the stadium, his company advertises, he comes in, he looks at his advertising. We now invite him to the SA20, he looks at their advertising. It's actually got an effect on it, something you got to manage. Matt, not that we don't like the SA20, it's been a big success, but the effect of that, you talk about protecting commercial rights. If you said to me 10 years ago that the Titans cricket team will not be the most supported team in Pretoria, cricket team, I would have laughed at you. The Capitals in-stadium support gets more than the Titans. It's actually amazing to think about it. I'm not sure how to feel about that, though, I must be honest. But it's a changing landscape like we haven't seen it, and it impacts on protecting of rights. Because if it's so congested, we signed 62 sponsors, you've got to manage all of them. Then you've got suddenly the SA20 coming, new set of sponsors. You've got to be hands-on. Like I said, my case study moves to the box. I got this from actually one of their memos, and it says here, it started off with counterfeiting is a serious problem. And then I look at while estimates vary, the total amount of counterfeit goods sold yearly is around 1.7 trillion to 4.5. That in itself is a big range, but I guess people that sell counterfeits aren't keen to partake in research on the matter. So I guess that data, one needs to think about that. And then it said it's probably the fourth largest economy in the world. But then it says it costs loss of jobs. It seems it will also create a bit of jobs as well if it's the fourth largest economy in the world. But the Springboks being a loved brand, doing well, winning the World Cup, a lot of passion points, a lot of people want to associate with them. And I'm sure you've heard the Checkers debacle, also the old school jersey, that's become a bit of a problem. And then Craig Ray, he actually does his homework quite well. He says that SARU made 426 million in sponsorship revenue in 2023. It seems quite a lot. I'm not sure if the number is correctly, but if it's not, then that's why I put Craig Ray at the bottom. And then an interesting one where they asked people if Checker 6060 was a sponsor. Now, percentage actually said yes. And again, that's part of the problem. For me, as an administrator, if you do ambush marketing, it's like coming into my shop and you take something and you don't pay for it. That's the analogy in my head. Joe Public thinks that this ad is really funny and these oaks are really, really smart. So there is a bit of a different look at it. And then this was put up in Nelspruit or White River, one of the two, but it was removed. Again, huge ambushing there with the champions and the whole setup. The Springbok brand, I think, is at an all-time high. That I've got to be honest, which requires a lot of protection. I'm not sure are they winning or not. You were going to bet on Nando's to bring out something anyway, isn't it? If you were to guess who would bring out something. So Nando's brought out this nice one. And then the Springboks, that's Escort. They got into a bit of trouble. They had to remove this when SARU approached the courts. Yeah, just putting an X in there apparently is not enough. But you know, this is straightforward ambush marketing. If you've ever seen this, yeah. The Springbok kit supplier is Nike, isn't it? That is, and I believe that Nike is highly upset about this ambush marketing. This is an interesting slide about Nike themselves, because they've actually been at it, isn't it? Especially if you look at the Olympics. So it's funny, what is the Nike, your lawyers aren't here. Let me just check this maybe before I go on. All right, and then 2010, these ladies were very surprised when I took off their jackets and they all suddenly were dressed the same. But that's, of course, Bavaria, the beer sponsor, nice flash mob. Now, the organizer got prosecuted. That was the first. So the organizer got prosecuted. So that's the first time. So it's a nice little flash mob, everybody coming in. But you can see people are dealing with it. Just going through protection, the IFC seem to have learned out of it. The research I've done is they would go in a couple of years before and make sure that they secure the airport. So there's no ambush marketing in the airport, but that's your first stop. First way that you can associate or ambush is the airport. And then precinct management, I speak about that a little bit later, and then you've got to name and shame, and you've got to educate. I mean, you don't have a choice. If you just let it go, I can tell you they will come up with a new ambush marketing. There's got to be some pain. And I think they've tried to do it so far, monitor and act. Use of Player Athletes Association. I don't want to steal your thunder, Andrew, but I was a CEO before SACA, even before the franchise. I still look so young, but I really have been in the industry a very, very long time, and they've got it worked out. We know what to do. Let's also tell you this story that at a stage our player of the month could get a Weber Braai, a big one. And so I'm not going to mention the player's name, but his agent phoned me, also a lawyer. He says, no, you've got to have 3 players in Titan's kit on the photo. You've got to now pay for the photo. He says, no, just bring the Weber back. He says, no, they really like the Weber. I said, it's difficult to put 3 oaks on for player of the month because he's only one. But that, Andrew, to the point, is the only time we've ever transgressed it, your rules. But there is a lot of clarity and much better worked out. So for me, protection also means player education and educating, I think, young executives as well. Sport doesn't do a lot of training. We spoke about it just now. So I'm not always sure, and remember I work in sport, that we attract the best. I got to be honest. But then we also don't train people. And if ambush marketing is such a huge challenge for everybody, surely you've got to be trained. I'm sure if you ask your average sport executive about ambush marketing, he wouldn't even on a certain level be able to discuss it with you. Now that doesn't help in protecting these brands. Like I said, if you sign a big sponsor, you can imagine what the rugby sponsors will do. And then early precinct management, that's important because people even tried to sell me a counterfeit of my own team. But a proper counterfeit, I always wanted to know where does he produce these things, because it actually looked all right. But you got to manage the precinct, that an early precinct, otherwise you're going to struggle. Then the other thing is what I try to think of from my budget perspective. So on a national level, if it's such a big issue, how much resources, that's human and financial resources, is put into combating this? And I think in the industry, we're reactive. So it happens, we're angry, we want to get people arrested. There's nothing proactive in place. We actually just hope that at some stage people will stop it. It never happens. So if something is important to you, then the resources that you got to apply to it's definitely time, it's definitely people, and it's definitely money. So in the absence of that, I can see that the commercial rights in sport is forever going to be under threat. Thanks. I think I came in good. Hey? There we go. Thank you.
We managed to secure an extra chair, so we all should be seated. Yeah, before, Annette, till what time have we got here? I forgot to check now. Till 20 past. Okay. Okay, great. So we have quite a bit of time. About sort of the outsized role of India in cricket. I heard, I think it was in one of the English test matches where they had the, I guess it was the CEO of English cricket, saying that they just had a recent ICC meeting in Sri Lanka, I think in Colombo, and he was asked, about India's bullying in effect, and of course he was very diplomatic. He said, let's put things in perspective. 80% of, I think he said 80% of what cricket brings in, ICC revenue, comes from broadcasting. And India brings in 80% of that. And so in a sense, and apparently 40% then gets distributed to the other leagues. So India is in a sense subsidizing the other unions. Of course, I think the ECB, of course, is very diplomatic because even with their own Ashes Test series, of course, against Australia, they're probably the biggest viewing audience is India. So, that's the imbalance in world cricket about the importance or disproportionate importance of India. I think you probably know that, but that's how it is, isn't it?
I think that's correct. So I just think India should play a world leadership role, which they're not keen to do. So that is their argument. We bring in the most money, we should get it. And it's related to just the amount of eyeballs that's on it. So we're going to host India T20, Proteas versus English T20, Pakistan T20, and then Boxing Day against Pakistan. Here's David. So some of the stats we got out of that could be as much as 600 million people watching that. And that makes it really powerful because it's reach per rand. I just think they've created the top three in England, India, and Australia. And if the rest of the world's not competitive, it also doesn't help. And South Africa can be one. Look, everybody got a bit more. I was in that ICC board meeting. So India is not even subtle on we want the most money. And their management style is a bit like bank robbing. Do as I say, nobody will get hurt. So that's how.
No, and I tend to agree with you that this is sort of bullying, and it's not healthy for the sport overall. And so it's a real concern. But about the ambush marketing and checkers, but don't you think it was, you remember at the time the Boks were playing in a different color, green, and the joke went out about, who's the sponsor? Is it Checkers? And so I think Checkers sort of woke up to that fact and thought, oh, well, there's an opportunity here for us. So I don't think it was them sort of who led the charge. It's sort of they picked up on people who were making a comment like, why is the color sort of different to the normal dark green and so forth. About, you mentioned even Titans shirts, counterfeiters getting into the market, which is a serious issue. Of course, from my perspective as an IP lawyer, and there's this sort of a myth that, it's a victimless crime, etc. And that's all nonsense because it's sort of sophisticated criminal gangs behind a lot of counterfeiting. And what people don't realize is that there is nothing that is not counterfeited. If there's money to be made in counterfeiting, there have been cases in Nigeria where pediatric cough syrup was being counterfeited, which contained brake fluid because it gave the cough syrup the sort of red color. So, it's sort of unconscionable actors involved in counterfeiting, and it's quite an extensive network. But, speaking from the fans' perspective and people who know me for longer than 5 minutes, when it's a sports law conference, they'll know which side of the sports and law I sit on. You know, I'm an avid sports fan. I'm not so keen on the law most of the time. And it's the pricing of jerseys. Like, you know, the official Nike jersey tends to be priced beyond the reach of the average fan. And, you know, that's an issue that creates opportunities for counterfeiters. And how is that balanced? But those are just some of my comments that I had relating. And sorry, cricket, you know, you mentioned Benson and Hedges, which for me is something, you know, I'm also of a certain age, and day-night cricket in South Africa was extremely healthy, I'd say, in the late 80s, 90s, right? Stadiums would be packed, domestic cricket, that is. And then, of course, it went to Standard Bank, if I'm not mistaken. And this was in the days before IPL, and I think we had sort of that type of environment where cricket was really, looked like it was financially healthy. I want to know and was there a Hansi effect? In the sense, after that scandal, did it hurt the game to the extent that it kept people away from it? Or had cricket moved on?
I actually think that, particularly in the Free State, after the Hansi saga, that the support dropped. He was an iconic leader, and he had the presence of a true leader. And of course, the match fixing didn't help, and then he died young. So I think he's a tragic hero now, and in a way, people remember Hansi, the captain, now more than what he's done wrong. I guess the fact that he died did that. I remember the Benson Hedges days, and I think cricket was healthy. I'm not sure the smoking contributed to that, the health of the general public at that stage. I think that was a challenge.
So about that, and maybe the others now, I'm going to bring other people in. You know, you've touched on it, sort of gambling. There's mention being made in the British press about how the top premiership teams, a lot of them are, the headline sponsors for a lot of the teams are betting companies. And both in relation to team sponsorships, but also player sponsorships. And of course, now people have said, you know, the online gambling industry sort of gets people hooked on gambling. And even from a player perspective, we've spoken about Hansi, and maybe Dave or other people involved in commercial sponsorship. As we know, with social media, etc., a player's image, something the person does, he or she did something, was seen doing something, suddenly, overnight, there's a backlash. You know, I don't know who said it this morning, what sponsors like is certainty. And when you deal with individuals, you are not sort of their nanny 24 hours a day. What happens when the tide turns? So, and in relation to gambling, you know, what if gambling sites are considered the new cigarettes? And suddenly it's being banned or regulated to an extent, and that source of revenue dries up for the sports industry. So some questions and maybe some comments from the panel. Dave, maybe you want to start?
Yeah, maybe just to jump in. And funny enough, I think maybe for the next time, the next session, which I'm doing, and this one should be reversed.
Okay.
Because, you know, I'll also talk about checkers and other things as well, but it's the commercial rights you then sell, and then how do you protect them after is part of the challenge, and how well you commercialize those rights and make them bulletproof against ambush is part of the trick to the trade, whether that's through your broadcast rights when it gets to Supersport and so on and so forth. But I think the point I'm going to take off my commercial hat, I'm going to put on my researcher's hat, because we're in a beautiful facility, which I wish I had. And BMI has tracked who watches and plays every sport since 1987. BMI has tracked the popularity of sports athletes, so we knew how popular Hansi was and other cricketers and rugby players and swimmers and through the years. We also go and ask sponsors how impacted they are as a result of a Hansi Gate or any other thing like that, winning or losing World Cups, etc. Many would argue, and probably correctly, that Saru and rugby wouldn't be the darling of South Africa had it not won back-to-back Rugby World Cups. It would be in bigger cock, if I'm allowed to say that as a Canadian, than cricket, who didn't happen to win, you know, the World Cups and get that rainbow sunshine effect of halo that you can do anything you like because you win. But the point is that I want to make is a very simple one. This stuff is measurable. You don't have to pontificate or say, I wonder what would have happened. And one of the reasons I'm leery of saying too much is because I get called by many court cases to say, Dave, what was the commercial impact as a result of? Dave, can you tell me how many of South Africans associate Checkers as a sponsor of rugby and or the Rugby World Cup? And we have those answers because we ask them. And we pay a lot of money to ask those questions, and not everybody likes the answers. But the point is that these things are measurable. That you can put a value to them, and we need more investing in it. And like you said, Jacques, with that intelligence that we're losing in our industry. You know, we used to have some of the top agencies. AB InBev was one, well, breweries at the time. I don't even want to call it. You came out of Unilever, you had a marketing degree, you understood sport. The agencies were doing the same things in the octagons. That's not happening the same way. And like we need in sport law, because we don't have sports lawyers, you know, there's a few now, but don't dedicate it. It's not a full-time job for most of us that want to be in that, and certainly not myself. ENS, they had someone doing sport law within them. It wasn't a division until it became one, until we made it big enough. But it's a 9 billion rand industry, sports sponsorship in South Africa. So we got to wake up and smell the coffee.
Well, while the next panelist thinks of it, the idea, as I said to some of our attendees this morning, is I think we recognize that at Stellenbosch Law Faculty. And the format of today's conference is really to get people together who seem to be working in pockets so that they can see who else is working in the space, and for us to identify what are the pressing issues that could benefit from research. And hopefully in future conferences, there can be papers dedicated to particular issues that people have looked at, that they've considered, and then present their findings, and then have debates about the development of areas of concern to people more generally in the industry. So yeah, that's what we hope to do.
Yeah.
Paul, do you want to add something?
Coming from the broadcast point of view, you know, that's a valuable right, and going back to the value of the Indian rights, I believe they're the second most valuable rights in the world currently, and you wouldn't think so. They're probably beaten out by the American football leagues. You would also think that the English Premier League would be well up there. So there's a significant investment by broadcasters, and they brought into the equation to also protect the rights of sponsors that are associated to an event. And so we need to be very careful as to what goes on air, so that we don't, in a way, contribute to, you know, negative reputation impacts. So if we allow something, an ambush marketing component to happen on a field, you know, it can be very problematic. You'll see we'll often cut away to avoid that. But where we as a broadcaster are particularly impacted and moves into the area of broadcast rights is around piracy and you know, the impact of that. Ultimately, the funding from license fees and broadcast rights deals flows all the way up to, you know, a mother body or to the players or to grassroots sport. And that entire chain is impacted by piracy, being, which takes away revenue, takes away taxation, and the nature of rights. I mean, I don't think we can do it justice in this session, but the cost to acquire exclusive rights as a pay TV broadcaster, is massively impacted. And so, we're very keen to see changes in the law that match technology. The technological advancement of digitization, IP streaming is a massive threat to us. And we work very closely with a lot of the major rights holders around the world. We protect their sponsor rights. Very often they'll have we have to give first options before we appoint our own sponsors. And what we see is a challenge around, the enforcement mechanisms, particularly in South Africa, which we think are quite weak. So, there's the audio and audio-visual content services white paper, which is an area, and perhaps it's something the university can look into, where we need internet service providers to take more action against sites that host our pirated content. It's a real challenge to us. We obviously operate across 52 countries. We have to deal with the local copyright laws in those territories, as well as the WIPO treaties in regard to the enforcement and protection. And so protection of that right is vital. And the only way we can do that is through collaborating with the large rights bodies.
Right. Anybody on this side want to comment on anything that's been said so far?
Well, thanks, Prof. I think just two important points in terms of research and protection of rights. What we see in rugby specifically is, and from a player's point of view, is it's a fairly small industry in terms of commercials, and it's developing quickly because I think we're catching up. We've only been professional for 30 years. And that creates gaps in terms of education. So educating players how the market works in terms of how they can contract is important, and I think it's important on a federation level as well. But then also to work with the external commercial partners to understand this development and the speed of the development, I think is important, and where we could give a lot of attention to. The second leg I also think is important is you require responsible corporate citizens to work with you. We've seen over the years a lot of corporate partners activating on rights that they might not own or don't have access to. And 90% of the time, those disputes are resolved by the corporate partner being fairly responsible and understanding. So for sport, I think we do rely a lot on them. And then just maybe a last point on rights protection is our capability to troll the market, and I don't know if that's the right word, but to catch the unauthorized use of rights in real time. We don't really have that capability, in my experience. And secondly, the definition of real time becomes an impossible definition because of, someone said earlier today, everyone is a journalist. But the activation, by the time you become aware of the activation, it's done and it's something of the past. And to then litigate with a corporate partner that's not so responsible will take you 3 years, etc., and the lawyers can tell us how long it will take. So real time becomes a definition that doesn't really exist anymore. So those are the challenges, I think, for us that we experience in that space.
Yeah, I mean, in that space, if somebody sort of ambushes, etc., the horse has bolted, right? Everything is after the fact now. How do you unring that bell? You can't. And how do you send out a message that this conduct is problematic and people shouldn't do it? Like you say, at the moment, the legal mechanisms are long, expensive. When will that lesson be learned? But and it was touched on in the previous session, education, right? As individual sports people, and I'm asking the panel more generally, people who work in the industry, from the player's perspective, maybe particularly, are there lots of, let's just say, people engaging in sharp practices? They get players to sign up to sort of deals where the player is maybe naive, young, not so sophisticated about what they're signing up to, only to find that they have sold themselves short. And where do the players unions or clubs play a role in protecting a player against sharp practices by, let's just say, people seeking to benefit of what they've done?
Thanks, Prof. Maybe to start off with a shout out for women's sport first. So Marius, when you won a gold medal in '95, we also did something special on the netball court in '95. And Prof. Debbie Hamman, where is she? She's on the other side there. I was in a class. I'm no legal boffin at all, but I was in Prof. Debbie Hamman's class over 30 years ago in commercial law. And
she didn't need you to say that.
And I know she's just retired, and she was my favorite netball player of all time. So yeah, that was a fantastic year for rugby and netball, Marius. I think, and thank you to the university also for putting this together, because as Jacques mentioned, I agree with him, there aren't many opportunities like this for people to engage and learn in the sport industry. There really needs to be a lot more of this. So I'm really enjoying the discussions we're having. I also, as Michael was saying earlier, what is sport law and how does that fit in? And I was trying to think about that over the last few days, and it's really there to help us, I think, and to enhance fair play, as we call it in sport, fair play on and off the field for all parties involved. There's a simple way of me defining it for myself, using law to make sure that there is fair play from a player's point of view, etc. You were talking about players, and of course then we start talking about agents, and that will be a whole different conference I think we have on that. But there's so many different stakeholders involved, and for me, some of the stakeholders have a vested interest in financial sustainability of the industry, and specifically that's our staff that are working in the industry, like a lot of us here, and the players. They need the industry to thrive and to be financially sustainable. And another set of stakeholders are then, they've invested financially in the industry. And we've been speaking about a lot of them, like club sponsors, club owners, the supporters pay money to go through the gate, and broadcasters. And they've got an expectation of a return on their investments. So how do we use law, sport law, to make sure and to protect all those different parties? If I could maybe just pick up on two of them, the player side, because I'm in football, that's very interesting. I know Jacques put up on his slide as well the ways the value chain in sport and how you make money in sports. Absolutely correct. Unfortunately, in local football, unless you are one of two teams, you don't make money in football, except for the broadcasting money that you get via your broadcasting grants, and then in player trades. So football has got a very mature player transfer market, as we all know. So for us, it's really important to protect our asset, which is the player. That's really important. The contracts that we sign with players, multi-year contracts, options to extend, all those good things, and of course that's with the player and their representative, their agent. So that's really important for us. That's because on the broadcasting side, the second stakeholder, and just touch on that, I don't really have a lot of say on that. Yes, there's an executive committee that deal with that and so on, but all in our case, 32 professional football clubs in our country get a certain grant, which is based on the money that, in our case, SuperSport provide into the sport. So it's really important for us to protect SuperSport's rights, because they are financially holding up the whole industry. And then you get into the whole debate. Dave and I touched on it a little bit outside, viewing games on SABC versus SuperSport. Shouldn't our population of football-loving people, which is 90% of the country, be afforded the opportunity to watch football on TV? Is it only the richer folk that can do that can afford decoders? Now, this is a hell of a debate, but what I can say is, if it's not exclusive rights to SuperSport, the industry goes down. It really is threatened big time in how much we can pay players, how many staff members we can upskill and be involved in the industry, etc. So there are really good reasons for having football on SABC, and I can tell you now, all football club owners and that are really excited when we see that our games are going to be on SABC and SuperSport, because Dave will tell you later on how the numbers just shoot through the roof, which is great for me. I can go back to my sponsor and say, look at that value you're getting. However, it needs to be balanced against what SuperSport's doing for the sport. Thanks.
On that, of course, and my colleague Philip Sutherland, we've spoken about the importance of broadcast getting exclusive rights, etc., and the through flow to, like you say, the various clubs, etc. Broadcasting rights, of course, are the most lucrative avenue and revenue source. But certainly in football, and as I said, I'm an avid sports lover, even in the 70s, 80s, when you used to watch sport only on SABC, because that was the only broadcaster back in the day, you definitely saw fuller stadiums. And there seems to be not so much sort of stadium spectatorship. It's only your big derbies and your big teams like Pirates and Chiefs that sort of garner that sort of stadium support. How do you get spectators back into stadiums as some form of additional revenue, which seems to have almost gone down to negligible for most clubs in soccer?
Yeah, I think, there's a host of reasons, and I think it's partly because of our past that the 80% of the people that love football in this country support Chiefs and Pirates. And there's reasons for that. So it's very difficult. As a new club, Stellenbosch Football Club, we're just trying to be everybody's second favorite team. And then if we get that right, we'll be the third best supported team in the country. Because it's really difficult to compete with, in our case, Chiefs and Pirates. It's a completely skewed model. It's not like that overseas. If you're born in London, you support Arsenal or Chelsea or West Ham. If you're born in Manchester...
You forgot Spurs.
Yeah, I didn't. That's because I'm an Arsenal supporter. I don't mention Spurs. So it's a good question. We need bums in seats. We want bums in seats. But again, the clubs must take responsibility for doing things. People are not going to just come sit there to watch a 90-minute football game. They want entertainment. They want to be able to bet on the games, to do things, to have other entertainment as well. Because there's just so many opportunities now to do other things. So there's a number of things that we do, and the broadcasters are also workshopping with us to try and make that happen. They also want bums on seats. The clubs want it. The players want it. So there's a host of things that we're hoping to continue working on.
Yeah, I think, just in terms of the commercial rights, for me, the interesting one at the moment would be within professional golf, and I think with Live Golf having come to the fore like it has, because, Jacques mentioned India and how they sort of dominate in terms of audience, and now you've got the ultimate ambush market in terms of Saudi Arabia and just unlimited capital that they can put into something. They don't even need a return on investment at this stage. They don't need sponsorship, but the majority of the traditional tours still do. And I'd really be interested, with the lawyers, how you would advise the sponsors on the PGA Tour, on the DP World Tour, on the Sunshine Tour, for instance. Because your commercial right there as a sponsor is you're going to get the best field that you're paying for that week. And now if those players are not there, because they've gone somewhere else, they're independent entities. What do you do as a sponsor? Because you don't get the broadcast, you don't get the views, you don't get the audience. So what is your rights then as a sponsor? And I think that's going to be a lot more interesting going forward to see how golf actually manages that, because I mean a sponsorship drives golf in a massive way. It does all sports, but certainly from individual golfers to federations. So much so we see it on the Sunshine Tour. I do a lot of work with the Sunshine Tour. We've got a window in the global calendar over the summer that we have our co-sanctioned tournaments, and we rely heavily on our big name South African players coming back and playing here. They don't have to, and a lot of times it's very difficult for them. And the tour can't force them to come back here. But it's dependent upon having your current top 5 in the world playing, and your visible players playing in a South African Open, so that the South African fans can see it, so that broadcaster can get value, sponsor can get value, and so on. And literally at this point, it's a letter from the commission of the Sunshine Tour, kindly asking Louw Oosthuizen, Dean Burmester, Eric van Rooyen, please make time in your calendar to come back and support the tour that made you. But that's as far as it goes at this point. If that player says, look, I can't for family commitments, that's where it ends.
I just want to touch on, say, cricket. We've had cricket as an example, and of course you are from cricket, Jacques. We've spoken about the negative impacts of, let's just say, the disproportionate influence of India on world cricket. I just want you to ask or probe, has the IPL, in your opinion, been, not just for individual players, of course, the few that play there, South Africans have made a lot of money, in the greatest scheme of things, has it been good for world cricket or not? In the sense that, of course, and I'll maybe elaborate a bit. So for Indian cricket, say over the last 15 years, I think it's been great for them in the sense that they have the best of the rest of the world playing in their league, playing with their youngsters, and they have caps on how many foreigners can play in a match. So their youngsters are now rubbing shoulders with the best bowlers and batters in the world, etc. But I don't know if that's been the best for, say, SA cricket or Caribbean cricket, etc. And now, of course, they've even bought clubs here. I think you made the comment that it's like a status symbol buying cricket teams now. It used to be football teams. At the time that Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea, etc., 20 years ago or something, 25 years ago, the joke used to be like, how do you make a small fortune in sport? You invest a large fortune, right? So is it just, like buying a wine farm? You're not interested in making money. It's just a status thing. Or is there a real profit motive when people buy sports teams like cricket teams?
I don't think investing in sport is the greatest return on investment ever. Let me tell you that. So, and I'll justify it like this. They spent around 130 million from probably November to March. Our expires a little bit later as well. So, I can tell you that if you look at the investment, the IPL team makes money. And then they spend around $5 million, $6 million with this. Their partners also bought Hampshire now. So I think sport brings something else to you that other things can't. I mean, you've got a team, you've got unscripted entertainment, you invest in something that the public really enjoy. But if you ask me, could they spend that 130 million rand differently and make more money? Definitely. So I don't see sport and buying a sports team as a great way to make money in cricket. That I can tell you. The IPL teams all make money now. It's matured quite nicely. I think it was one that didn't make money, but I think they're all on board now. The IPL has been very good getting in new crowds, but cricket is the easy way. So we played 5 days. We started off with more day cricket. And every time that there's less spectators, we just cut off a few overs. So we're down now to 20 overs. So that's what happened. So American president, after seeing a 5-day cricket match, said it's baseball and Valium. So just give you an idea on that. But the effect of the T20 is that the other formats, the 50 over and more day crickets, under pressure. We've got this idea that if there's more sport, people will support more sport. I don't think it's the case. I think they migrate to what is the most entertaining, and that's now T20. That is, it's amazing. It cut out all the boring parts. As easy as that. It's tailor-made for your spectator. I remember I was the CEO at Potch, and Standard Bank brought out those hard hats, and the students were queuing, and I asked them who's playing, and they couldn't tell me. They were waiting for their hard hats, and remember, that's a mining area, so there should be some hard hat in their house anyway. But so T20 is that. It's action-packed. So it brought in probably a new market. It's put all the other formats under pressure. And what India is doing now, they own all 6 franchises in the SA20, and I can tell you now that we would have not been able to do that from within South Africa. Not that level of capital, that level of passion. It's actually amazing how much money they've put in, and I think cricket benefits out of it. Does it have an impact on the domestic game? I think so. But you know, like any industry, cricket cannot be just in one space all the time. It evolves, and we got to make sure, as the Titan CEO, I got to make sure that I get to partake in that. We were a bit nervous bringing to Pretoria because we don't have a lot of vegetarian restaurants. But boy, that they fell in love with our beef. I think yes, they eat steak like you haven't seen.
So you think the IPL has lifted all boats in a sense?
Look, it has in a way, but what subsequently has happened that you now have other leagues as well. You've got the Big Bash, you've got the CPL,
Caribbean,
got the 100, there's one in Dubai now, we've got the SA20, and the SA20 I think is right up there in terms of entertainment, quality of play. It is an amazingly well-run organization. I'm actually proud to say that they should be an example to other leagues. So there's a lot of money involved, but what's going to happen is you've got to be careful for free agencies, people just praying. We got Shamo now that says he loves us and he's available, but he doesn't want a contract. He wants to play wherever he can. So you know, there's pros and there's cons, but it definitely brought in a new audience. We see it in South Africa as well. We host a test match. You see an older crowd, all right, David? And then I actually got to be careful to reflect on any form of stats with you sitting here because you got it all. So, but this is what we see. It's an older stat and a younger generation looking at the T20.
Maybe just to add a stat.
Okay, last comment before we wrap up. I know CEO loves the cricket chat. He's an avid cricket lover, but I think we're going to have to.
No, so, you know, when you have sevens rugby, it's a very different game with different players than 15. Where T20, it got a bit more blurred. And so when T20 first came to this country and we started doing research on it, what we found was it grew the sport in the sense that it brought in people that weren't cricket fans. Coming from North America, I knew baseball, I didn't know cricket. What is this crazy game that takes 5 days and you take tea breaks and you wear white and nobody ever wins? And it's sportsmanlike to go home with a draw. Right? You stay until someone wins in North America. It's as simple as that. And how do you sell that? But the point is that, so when we started polling, particularly amongst the youngsters, they loved T20, but they weren't cricket fans. They loved T20, the entertainment. We were selling entertainment. We weren't selling the sport. And the danger is, I learned one day, I could graduate eventually, if I was clever enough and cared, to a 5-day because of the strategy. I could figure that out. To go from T20 to 5-day. So the risk of cannibalizing and killing your sport long-term, commercially and otherwise, and not having the best players play 5-day is the real threat. Now, sport will figure that out on its own, not me.
Does anybody on this side want to add something before we wrap the session up? No, great. But I think it's been a great session. Thanks. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Philip Sutherland, who's going to speak about competition law and sport. So I think you will have realized from this morning's administrative law, competition law, these are areas of law which we think are under-researched in relation to sport. And I think it will become clear when Philip does his presentation now. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.